From my perspective, the answer as to who exactly is Tyrion's father has now been well settled. I know everyone has their own belief, so try to think of what is the exact evidence or logic you have for your own belief, and then compare it to the theory here, especially how Jeopardy basically cinched it for me. Okay, I guess I've gone on long enough. Tyrion has two biological fathers. Both Tywin and the Mad King are his genetic dads. Sir Steffon here, from the shoulders of YouTube's giants. I'm back with an old coconut notion. Tyrion is a genetic chimera, meaning he grew from two fused eggs, rather than just one single egg. This makes a lot of sense. If some mothers are genetically inclined to produce multiple eggs each of their cycles, then Cersei and Jaime stand as testimony for it possibly having happened in Tyrion's case as well. And from Tyrion's early description, we can kind of guess that he grew from two fused eggs. In Jon's first chapter of Game of Thrones, Martin gives us this description of Tyrion, quote, "One green eye and one black one peered out from under a lank fall of hair so blonde it seemed white." Okay, so under extremely rare circumstances, a person can be what is known as a genetic chimera, and this is when they contain separate DNA from an undeveloped twin, and they have eyes with different colors as a result. And we know Martin is thinking about this. Think about Meleys the Monstrous, who had his dead conjoined twin's head on his shoulder. The following quote is from Dance, the Lost Lord chapter. "One skull was larger than the rest, grotesquely malformed. Below it was a second, no larger than a child's fist. Meleys the Monstrous and his nameless brother." To go forward with Martin, you always have to go back. What is his lived experience as he sits to write Game of Thrones? Most of you guys are probably too young to recall the original Total Recall movie in 1990. The one with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I kind of wonder if Martin got a little inspiration from Meleys the Monstrous from it. Look into the rebel leader called Kuatu when you get a chance, and how in the movie there are genetic mutants from the solar radiation levels on Mars. Interestingly, Total Recall is based on a short story called We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. It's by Philip K. Dick and was first published in the April 1966 issue of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. Martin would be very familiar with this magazine as he sold material to it in the early years of his career. One crazy piece he had in the magazine is the short story The Monkey Treatment, which became a Hugo and Nebula finalist. But I digressed way too far, and we don't even now have time to talk about how Quaid, the protagonist of We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, has a telepathy implant. We were supposed to be talking about fused eggs, right? So back in 1990, and the years leading up to Game of Thrones publication, we have the birth of the Hensel twins. These twins from Minnesota are conjoined. You may have seen or read about them over the past few years. Theirs is an amazing story. Genetically, they are different from what has been proposed with Tyrion. They are identical twins, and the theory presented here has Tyrion as containing two fraternal siblings, more similar to Cersei and Jaime. But the general idea is that they were in the news, so to speak, during the formative period of Game of Thrones. The twins appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show in April 1996 and were featured on the cover of Life around the same time. Though this is very close to the published date of Game of Thrones, they were obviously newsworthy prior to 1996. And from the very beginning, George wants us to think about Tyrion having a twin. From Game of Thrones, Tyrion won. Tyrion wondered what it would be like to have a twin, and decided that he would rather not know. Bad enough to face himself in a looking glass every day. Another him was a thought too dreadful to contemplate. George is a frackin' devil. But it gets weirder and wilder. It is not just that Tyrion is a, quote, scientific chimera, grown from two fused eggs. He's also a chimera in a fantasy sense. He's a lion fused with a dragon. He has two dads, one a lion and one a dragon. This is called heteropaternal superfecundation, and this is where the Jeopardy part of the story finally comes in. Did I successfully bury the lead here? Heteropaternal superfecundation is when fraternal twins have two different fathers. We know it happens because twins sometimes get paternity tests in custody proceedings. And you guessed it, it's rare but it happens. The twins have different dads. To go forward with George, we have to go back. There often seems to be a place where he gets his coconut ideas. And for years, I've been trying to figure out exactly where he got the idea for heteropaternal superfecundation. While watching Jeopardy, it was during the Matt Amodio run, if you know who that is, we get this as an answer. Appearing as a swan to Leda, Zeus became a dad to at least one of these twins, the Dioscuri. Obviously, that's complicated. And the correct question is, what are Castor and Pollux, the Gemini twins? In Greek mythology, the Dioscuri were the twin brothers Castor and Pollux, also called Polydeuces. Their mother was Leda, but they had different fathers. The king of Sparta was the father of Castor, while Zeus was the father of Pollux. And of course, we know George is incorporating Greek mythology all throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. In 1997, there was a great movie with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta called Face Off. Maybe it was an influence on George, who knows. The anti-hero or villain and his brother were Castor and Pollux. But I want to go back a decade to 1987 and put off the discussion of faceless men for the time being. Now I'm really dating myself here, but I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 on opening weekend. Let me tell you, those were the days. Anticipation waiting on the long line, that perfect buttery movie popcorn, and the jump scares in the packed theater. It was a roller coaster of emotions. And we find out a little bit about Freddy Krueger's backstory in the third movie. How Krueger was the bastard son of 100 asylum maniacs who assaulted his mother. Maybe this is where Martin got his idea for the Lawless Stoker story, who received a very similar treatment. And what do Lawless and Bronn name their bastard son of multiple fathers? Tyrion, of course. Kind of as a conclusion, I want to give one more idea from George that kind of points to Tyrion being both a genetic chimera and a metaphorical one. When Tyrion comes to greet the Dornish and welcome them to King's Landing in his 5th chapter in A Storm of Swords, he tells Oberyn he loves a good tail. And well you might, since you were said to have one, a stiff, curly tail like a swine's. Your head was monstrous huge, we heard, half again the size of your body, and you had been born with thick black hair and a beard besides, an evil eye, and lion's claws. Your teeth were so long, you could not close your mouth, and between your legs were a girl's privates as well as a boy's. This played out a little differently in the TV show, but here is that clip.
You and my family have more in common than you might admit.
The whole way from Dorne, all anyone talked about was the monster that had been born to Tywin Lannister. A head twice the size of his body, a tail between his legs, claws, one red eye. The privates of both a girl and a boy.
That would have made things so much easier.
One part that really jumps out at me, other than the monster description, is Tyrion having both types of privates. So his chimera genes, the 2 sets, could be an XX embryo fused with an XY embryo. A lot of people may think, is George really thinking about all these genetic details? I promise you he is. There are actually way too many things to list. A few I like that might be a bit lesser known are that Boris Blunt has Blunt's disease. It seems like Brienne has something like Swire syndrome, and Sweet Robin has pectus excavatum, which is often an X-linked recessive trait, similar to the Targaryen Dragon X gene. Speaking of the Dragon X gene, since Tyrion has female genetics as well as male, if Oberyn was actually onto something, then he can be double or triple Dragon X. Maybe he can ride dragons, hatch eggs, and be fireproof like Dany. And yes, I know you're quite certain Dany is not fireproof in the books. But that's an argument for another day. For now, you could just consider the Sansan shipping proof. And please don't forget to thumbs up for heteropaternal superfecundation and Zeus being disguised as a swan. For Septa Shaena Productions, Sir Steffon out.